Everybody, welcome back to Video Mess. So Terracotta got a different episode this Sunday for you than I anticipated because I told you the next time Mars showed off some more content of Mars FPGA, I would make a video and discuss what was going on. And it has been a couple of weeks since I've been able to talk about anything Mars because I've been in a little bit of a holding pattern, it seems, just kind of hanging out on Twitter, not really saying too much. But Free Play Florida is this weekend, and it is Saturday night around 8 p.m. as the time I'm recording this voiceover, and the Mars team has shown off a game running on the hardware. No, it is not Dreamcast, I'm just using that clip. It is Soldier Girl Amazon, released in 1986 by Nichibutsu, if I am pronouncing that right. And if you're not aware of this game's existence, I wouldn't be surprised. It's definitely a deep cut. I'm assuming a lot of people have not quite yet heard of it, but they are showing off footage of this running on the Mars FPGA board down in Florida, and this seems to be the first known game working for the board in and of itself. All of these assets are from Twitter, and they're all credited to the people that you see appear in the captures right here. So if you take a look at this screenshot right here, you will see the Mars FPGA board in the bottom left hand corner, and I'll show you some close-ups soon, but it is running the game in Tate mode, and that is because it is a Tate game. And if we take a look at the gameplay again, this is via MAME. This is running on a Zilog Z80, and it's a mid-80s game, so this is firmly in the 8-bit generation of CPUs. This isn't Motorola X68000 or anything more advanced than that. This is definitely on the Zilog Z80, although getting specs on this board, not easy at all, because like I said, it's not a relatively known game. And if you take a look here, I mean, it is just a game running on Mars FPGA. That's what I said I would show next time we had some more content, and it definitely seems to be running on that board, and that's what you guys were curious about. Now, this seems to be the only game they're showing running at this point in time. Like I said, maybe tomorrow in the afternoon they'll show a second game, and this video will be outdated, but I am just giving you guys the news as it comes into me. I know a lot of people have been wondering when Dreamcast is going to be working on Mars FPGA, and it seems like if that could possibly be working on Mars at this point in time, they're not currently showing it off at Free Play Florida or any of these 16-bit games that they have teased on Twitter either. It seems like the game they're showing, I haven't seen any information about on Twitter from the Mars FPGA account, but if there was one game and hardware that they have teased that would be the closest spec-wise and would still be more advanced, would be the original Beast Busters from SNK. So kind of just take that as you will. That's the game they decided to show first. Must be a fan of somebody over at Mars that loves this game that much. But the arcade history is big out there. There's so many different games, and just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean it's not a good one, and this one is relatively decent. It's a fun time, that run and gun style game. Pretty much every developer made one back in the day, and now we have one running on Mars FPGA down in Florida. But there's also been a lot of high-resolution photos captured of the actual Mars board itself. And you'll take a look at this one right here, Next Gen Vaporware Alert. That looks to be a MIDI module right there, but I will get into that in just a moment to try to match it up to some light parts that I have in my collection. But that's the Mars board. You're going to see that titanium FPGA chip in the center. You're going to have your VGA port doing all of the analog out to the right. Seems like power in near the green LED board, and a USB-C for controls, which I will show you a close-up of in a moment either. But this seems to be the Mars board, at least on the development side. I'm sure this is going to change before it potentially ships to customers, because pretty much all development boards do. But you got a top-down look here of the board in and of itself, and you can see the header that had that board about vaporware is not on this particular board, so it seems like it might be doing something on one and not the other. But there are MIDI in and MIDI out ports over here on the board as well, and I'll show you a little bit more close-up of that so you can get a sense of it. It's going to say MIDI in, MIDI out, and there seems to be a line out and line in as well. And if that header looks familiar and that board looks familiar, that is because I'm pretty sure this is running Pi emulation for MIDI, which is not saying that it's a problem. MiSTer does the exact same thing, but when I took a look at those headers and what it was doing with those MIDI ports, it reminded me pretty much identically of the MT32 Pi hat from MiSTer that I did a video on a very long time ago that works the same way. So it seems like Mars is planning on having MIDI implementation, and I can't see what's underneath that board, but the header and the overall spacing and the way it mates to the Mars board reminds me exactly of the MIDI implementation over on MiSTer, and it will be fun to see if they get MIDI there, because there are some devices that do use MIDI to a lot of good effect. Stuff like the Sharp X68000 or the AO46 core on MiSTer can utilize MIDI, and it is so much fun to have that as a feature, so it seems like the Mars team is planning on that vaporware board as well. Now on the control side, you can just see a breakout board. Looks like it's just using a DB15 standard Neo Geo style plug, and it's going in via USB-C. So it's just a little bit of a breakout board into that USB header right there versus just going directly USB in. Not sure if there's any chips on that board. We'll just have to wait and find out further on down the line. But you can see here in the top left hand corner as well, there's an unpopulated micro SD can right there. That would get soldered into the board, so you could actually put micro SD cards. So I'm assuming the cable that goes underneath the board that we can't see must be a mass storage device leading off to some other hard drive off screen, but of course I can't see that. Now we talked about the VGA port right here, and that's going to be pretty much the same on MiSTer. They're talking about 15, 24, and 31 kilohertz out with RGB and pretty much every other standard supported, and that's something that's pretty much commonplace in FPGA. And if you have an RGB TV, you're definitely going to want to be using MARS on that. But they're clearly showing it going into a Sony PVM, so you know that the RGB implementation is working. But these are the interesting breakout boards. You can see a couple chips there. I can't, of course, read any sort of codes off them whatsoever, so I cannot pull any data sheets, but it does just show some of the control options. They've also announced some other controls as well. Jason's Customs here is doing this big metal box, and it looks like it just has a Mars Titan logo on there with a classic Sega control panel style cutout that's just bolted to the board. So it's a rectangular arcade box stick. I'm sure there's no FPGA hardware in here. It just seems like something's going to be sold in conjunction with MARS FPGA whenever it is ready to ship. But it looks like a relatively nice box. I know Jason's Custom does a lot of great work on the CPS side of stuff with his metal cases, so I would assume that the quality on this is going to be exactly as you would expect all of his other products to be, which is to say exceptional. He does great metal work and the power coding in all of the different cases he does, so I'm sure it's going to be great when it's available. And of course, it wouldn't be a product demonstration if somebody didn't point their camera at the board, pull back to prove that it was running on the board, and zoom back in all in one shot, so no one could accuse them of using any camera trickery. I don't think anyone's accused MARS of not running this stuff on the boards, but it's just funny. Every time there's a new product, any product, I always see this shot. But this is the game that MARS showed off for the first game publicly shown running on the board, and I'm pretty sure it's not what anybody expected it to be whatsoever. But you tell me down below in the comments, what game did you expect to see and what game did you want to see? It is fun to see something running on this, but of course time will tell what other demonstrations we get and what other games are shown running next on MARS, because I know there's a long roster of games that they have teased and previewed on their Twitter, and I think now that a lot of people are expecting them to deliver all of that on day one, so it will be interesting because we did go over the specs on that TI-180, the FPGA chip on board MARS in and of itself, and the core that they're currently showing running really wouldn't require anything near that spec. Something like the Dreamcast might require all the logic elements that are available on that chip, but we haven't seen any demonstration of Dreamcast yet, and I'm pretty sure 9 out of 10 comments down below when I ask you what you wanted to see running on MARS this weekend, something tells me Dreamcast and Naomi are going to be at the top of everybody's list, because the MARS team has teased both of those systems so many times I think everyone expects it to be day one release. But the game that they showed first was Soldier Girl Amazon, and like I said, if you know this game, leave me a comment down below because I would be curious. But you can see that MARS can run an FPGA core for an 80s arcade game, and now we'll see what else comes next. But at some point in time, MARS FPGA will be a real product you can purchase, and don't take that the wrong way. I'm not saying it's not real now, I'm just saying the version you are seeing is definitely not retail ready. It is marked as a prototype, and it's not a judgment on the board, that's just how product development goes. But when it does come out, of course I will acquire one, and I will talk about it on the channel and tell you all about what I find out about it. But as far as what MARS currently does, it runs Soldier Girl Amazon, and that seems to be what they're previewing. Like I said, doing this voiceover on 8 PM, so maybe tomorrow they show off Dreamcast and I'll have to do another video. Short of that, that's MARS. Bye bye.